Hi, everyone. Will Critchlow here again, founder and CEO at SearchPilot, and just getting up and running as usual. So, just going to take a second while the various streams catch up. I think YouTube should be up and running, which is great. LinkedIn, let's go. And Twitter will be starting any second, which is great. Good. We're live. So, I don't know this week if I've got quite as much of the things I've been reading and listening to talk about because, well, I'm still plugging my way through the things I talked about before. The Challenger Customer I'm listening to on audiobook, the Stephen King book on writing, which I'm enjoying, but I've slowed down a little bit. Now I've got into the detailed actual writing tips rather than his autobiography. And yeah, so I'm reading a physical copy of the Stephen King book and listening to the audiobook of Challenger Customer. So what have I watched anything recently? Well, so this is a useful snippet for a few folks, I guess, maybe, is I discovered that True Detective got good again. So I enjoyed season 1, and season 2 was weird. And then season 3, quite enjoying that. And so we're going back through watching the old episodes of season 3, and season 4 has started, but it's streaming one episode at a time. So yeah, if that's your kind of thing, and that's useful to you, I found it useful to know that it was worth dipping back into True Detective. But anyway, that is probably not why most folks would tune into this kind of thing. So I'm doing these calls weekly, normally at about this time on a Tuesday. And I tend to talk a bit about some SEO testing related topics, maybe a little bit of industry news, and maybe some other things that are interesting to me at the moment. If you want to get more information about any of the things I'm talking about, well, particularly the SEO testing side of things or SearchPilot related information, then you can head over to searchpilot.com/live for everything related to that side of things. There's links to more information as well as a form to get in touch if you'd like to see the actual SearchPilot platform in action. So that's searchpilot.com/live. You can also follow me or SearchPilot on Twitter and LinkedIn. That's at Will Critchlow or at SearchPilot in those different places. And this live stream is possibly best consumed on YouTube. So follow SearchPilot there if that's your bag. So into the kind of more core topics this week, I wanted to talk a little bit about, well, it's going to segue into some more current affairs kind of things around generative AI and machine learning generated content. But before we get into that, I was thinking a little bit about scalable websites. And this is something that the work that we do at SearchPilot, where we're primarily working with large enterprise sites, running tests on huge websites, that's kind of all we see these days. So back in the agency days, I did a lot more work with B2B SaaS or small media sites or a range of other smaller websites or sites that didn't have necessarily the same kind of templated site section approach. These days, in SearchPilot, that's pretty much all I see. So we're doing a lot of work in the travel, e-commerce, real estate, jobs, listings, local, any of those kind of domains where websites tend to be large and have a lot of pages that are that have the same kind of setup. So in an e-commerce world, for example, you're talking about product listing pages and product detail pages, PLPs, PDPs. And in a travel world, for example, that might be routes or destination pages. And the interesting thing here is I think this is where a lot of the most interesting, innovative, and exciting bits of SEO happen. I've always been a little bit of a technical SEO at heart, I suppose. I love consuming content. I'm not as great a producer of content. And obviously a lot of offsite signals tend to come from your kind of content creation and PR capabilities. And so technical is what I know best and where I think I personally have been more expert. And there's been, I'm not going to rehash the arguments. There's been a lot of discussion and debate over the years about the role of technical SEO, how big a deal it is, how important it is, and the future of it. I think oftentimes when people talk about SEO is dead or SEO is going to be dead, they're often talking about tech. They're talking about, it's just all going to be built into the CMS, or uh, engineers and developers are just going to learn the SEO that they need, and there's no specialist role for them ongoing. Now, I mean, spoiler alert, I disagree. And I think mainly I disagree through lived experience. That this people have been saying this since 2000, probably before I got into the industry, to be honest, before 2005. But certainly since I've got in the industry, and 18 years later, almost 19 years later, we're still going. But I think more kind of academically and philosophically about it is that I love the old school definition of SEO. It used to be called competitive webmastering. Right? You go back before it was an industry, before it was really a thing, go back to the 90s. And that's what folks used to call it. And in fact, I first got my start in the creator site forums with a bunch of OG SEOs giving advice back there. And a lot of it back then, that was a webmaster forum. And I think when you think of it as competitive webmastering, you start to realize, A, it's competitive, and B, it's never ending. It's and no matter how well you're doing, there's always an opportunity to do better, and there'll be value in doing better because you'll be stepping ahead of the competition now or in the future. And so, yeah, I guess that's where I'm coming from on that. And the interesting thing about our work today is scalable site sections generate huge visibility and huge amounts of organic search traffic. And I suspect, I don't have the stats, I suspect that much of the world's organic search traffic in total goes to scalable websites, scalable site sections, with a strong second place for big media sites, I suspect. And so I feel very fortunate. I feel very lucky that we at SearchPilot get to work on those most important, most innovative, and largest sites. But what I've been thinking about is, therefore, what can other sites learn from that, or what can authoritative sites do to build out scalable site sections that will help them take advantage of this huge opportunity that remains for many. And so this could be anything from, I'm just going to talk through some different examples. Could be anything from big brands launching e-commerce, for example. I feel like I'm going back to my roots. Back in 2005, when we got started as web design and development, my kind of sales pitch was asking folks if they had a website, and if not, would they like a website? And this was in the era when you could still realistically go into a local restaurant or local pub or wherever and say, do you have a website? Rather than that kind of, I guess, being a given. And so, but yeah, I kind of feel similar. Do you have e-commerce? Can folks buy from your website? Because PLPs and PDPs are, I think, one of the biggest potential opportunities in scalable sites. That's one kind of thing. Locations and local is another element. So if you've got a national presence or a global presence, then scaling that out so that you've got a genuine web presence for all of those locations is another kind of interesting area. Any kind of database, and this, I think, rather than going back to the beginning of my career, is more like the 5 years in. And so in that 2009 through 2012 kind of era, that was a huge amount of our consulting work, was helping folks bring online databases that weren't visible online yet. And I think there's another resurgence coming in this, unlocked by the possibilities of machine learning, AI gen content, which I'll come on to in a second. But so, that this could be opening up your facets. It could be exposing new data. So we see this with in the jobs industry, for example. Folks like in the UK, Zuna has done this really well, of building out salary information, for example, and being able to break that down by job title, by region, by geography. And again, that comes to the local element, that actually turns out they've got local data in a way that might not be immediately obvious. So I think the keys here are, it's not just about having the volume of pages. It's about having a scalable site structure. So is there a hierarchy to those pages? Can you do a sensible, scaled out linking scheme, breadcrumb scheme, categorization of those pages so that there's a good navigation structure? And again, I think jobs is a great example of this. So jobs is a classic dual hierarchy. You've got the hierarchy of jobs. So accounting jobs, forensic accounting jobs as a hierarchy, and you've got the location hierarchy of jobs in Massachusetts broken down to jobs in Boston or wherever. And so I think there's a range of different angles of attack on that. But the one that I thought was interesting that maybe we'll segue into the current affairs side of things is it's one of the areas where I've seen the most innovative uses of AI gen content recently. Is the big challenge if you're going to use any of these tools to produce large language models to produce content for your website, you're basically facing two challenges. One is I guess you can mitigate with human oversight, is the hallucination problem. It's the quality control. Is it good? Is it true, honest, right, made up? And with careful attention to the settings, careful testing, and potentially some editorial oversight, you can overcome that problem. I think the bigger challenge and the more kind of core one at this stage of the technical evolution is it any good? Is it differentiated? Is it anything that a million people in your industry couldn't just press the same button and get the same answer? And so I think the innovative bit that I've seen here is where folks are taking paywalled data or databases that they don't necessarily want to just expose fully. They're paywalled for a reason. This is maybe the business model. And being able to do things with that data is important to their customers or their users. But what you can do is feed that data into the prompt, into the training, into building out the response that is then unique to your business and is something that other folks couldn't easily copy. So, if you've got that data, it might be proprietary or secret or just paywalled in all kinds of ways. Then you can think about, well, could I don't want to expose the raw data, but could I expose insights from the data? Could I feed that in as training, or could I feed that into the prompt? That's, as I say, some of the more innovative use of LLM generated content that I've been seeing on the web. And if you can get the quality high enough, then it kind of the uniqueness and the differentiated nature of it somewhat takes care of itself, because you are feeding it your proprietary data, and that is difficult for others to replicate or to use. And so I think we're going to see more of that, where we're saying, okay, we have something proprietary. We're going to add an element of large language model, machine learning generated content to it to make it A, human readable, B, expose the valuable search engine fodder, answers to questions that people might be searching for, is, I guess, fundamentally what it's coming down to, but while maintaining the proprietary nature of the data, so it's still worth folks going through that paywall, logging in, signing in, whatever it might be. And I think actually we might see more of this even in data that is proprietary but never going to be exposed, not even behind a paywall. So sales data for e-commerce sites, trend data, internal search keyword volume, these kinds of things could all be training material potentially for differentiated LLM generated content. And tying it back to why I'm here, so reminder, I run a company called SearchPilot, and we do SEO testing, SEO A/B testing. So we help folks figure out whether individual changes, individual hypotheses and changes to their large websites are going to be valuable in the eyes of search engines, and whether they're going to result in more visibility and more traffic and ultimately more business. And there's a key thing here. We're talking about LLM, ML gen content. Is it's super dangerous to be doing that without testing. And I think that everybody who is doing it at scale, which is pretty much the only time to do it, there's really very little point creating one page using AI. The point is that you can do it at scale. And I remember, I'm not going to name names to save embarrassing him, but a friend of mine who spoke at, I think it was SMX West 15 years ago, talking about how it wasn't spam. He was simply using computers to do the same thing that he would do if he had the time and the patience, and he was just using computers to do it faster. And anyway, point being, the only reason for using AI in this mode is to be able to do more, to do it faster, to do it cheaper. And that only really applies at scale. So by definition, you're doing it at scale. By definition, you have scalable site sections output as a result. I know tons of folks who are experimenting with this in e-commerce, putting content on the PLPs, for example, enhancing product descriptions. We see it with, as I say, all these kind of database type exposures. And so you have to test that. You have to know whether that content is more valuable than whatever you have there right now, whether it's more valuable than nothing in some cases, whether it's more valuable than the potentially human written content, which may be expensive to produce, maintain, and scale, and even whether different approaches are more or less valuable. And this is philosophically, I've said before in these conversations, I would hate to be doing this work right now personally without the tools that we're working on at SearchPilot. And I feel a lot of founder market fit alignment here. I love working in this sector and doing what we do because I've been fascinated by SEO for basically my entire working life. And this is the most exciting, most innovative area of things that I can see that we could possibly be working in SEO. So yes, I'm biased, but really it's just passion. You can call it passion instead. So I'm passionate about this. And if I were doing this kind of work, I were considering rolling out machine learning generated content to a large site or any other major change to a huge site, any kind of on-site SEO, I would want the ability to be able to quantify the impact of those individual changes, to accrue business value to the specific change, to measure it down to the the conversion, the revenue side of things, and the actual business metrics, and to be able to produce that into the kind of report that would be valuable to my boss, my manager, to leadership, and even further up. And I guess really long run, I have this vision that we can move SEO up the food chain into the boardroom, into public company financial reports. I want to see more mentions of search in 10Ks and board decks and all the rest of it, because I'm fascinated really that we don't see more. There are so many businesses these days that are hugely dependent on their organic search visibility who barely mention it at all. They'll talk about their ad spend, they'll talk about their campaigns much more than they'll talk about their organic search visibility. And I think, maybe some of that is that they don't want to flag quite how vulnerable they are to Google's whims in particular. But they call out all kinds of other risk factors in those reports, and they're public companies typically, so they're beholden to shareholders, us, anyone with a 401k or stakeholder pension scheme, the UK equivalent, I guess, is a shareholder in these things. So they're beholden to us. They should be telling us quite how on the hook they are for their organic search traffic. But so I have this vision that if we do this right and we achieve our mission at SearchPilot, then we can move that up the food chain a little bit and get those conversations happening at the strategic levels where they should do. And maybe sometimes we have to talk about the innovative shiny thing in order to get there. And right now that is, of course, AI, ML, and LLMs. Which leads me, I guess, into the final thing that I was going to talk about today, which is the other side of search, still related to artificial intelligence and machine learning, which is what Google calls the SGE, Search Generative Experience, their response to ChatGPT, Bing Chat, all those kinds of areas. There's so much to unpick here, but I haven't talked a great deal about it. My view is this is probably a sustaining innovation. So anybody who's familiar with Clayton Christensen's model of disruptive and sustaining innovations, disruptive innovations are those that tend to blow the incumbent out of the water. So some upstart will come along with something that the incumbent can't match and produce something that gets good enough and is way different or cheaper on some other axis that the incumbent can't compete with, and they eventually lose out to the upstart. The flip side to that is the sustaining innovations, which typically benefit the folks who are already dominant in that market. And there are some kind of famous examples of each, but I think the evidence we have so far suggests that this is probably more sustaining innovation. When Bing rolled it out, for example, we haven't, although we've seen a lot of usage of ChatGPT and probably a fair amount of Bing Chat, we haven't seen it meaningfully change the market share in the search market. And I think we probably would have seen some of that by now if we were going to. That, I think, is what has led Google to slow play in their rollout of SGE. So they've treated it a little bit more as R&D. I think they had this very defensive approach of, well, look, we invented this stuff. We invented the transformer. We invented the large language model. And isn't it embarrassing, I guess, though I'm sure there were some angry words spoken, isn't it embarrassing that someone else has launched this product before us? And obviously at peak hype, when everybody was talking about ChatGPT being the fastest tool to 100 million users ever, I'm sure there was some fear. And so Google quickly rolled out their beta labs version. But they've slowed played since then. And I think they're probably seeing the same things I am, which is this doesn't seem to be the disruptive interface that users are going to demand everyone uses. Otherwise, they're going to go somewhere else where it is available. So that's the first point. Is I think it's phenomenal technology, and I'm using LLMs myself more and more. In fact, also, it's not an LLM, is it? But it's similar kind of generative AI technology. The cover art I used for this live stream on Twitter and LinkedIn is machine generated. So I've been using it myself more and more, but I don't think that necessarily the chat interface or chat user experience is the dominant way that we're going to want to find answers, find products, and do things that look like searches, particularly commercial searches. I think there are some times when conversation is the right answer. Typed conversation, maybe. We've had this argument about voice search in the past. I'll go on that rant another day. But I think this is mainly an additional overlay. I think most of our chat usage is going to be in addition to our search volume, in particular in the more commercial areas. So we might do these things, we might do them as well, but they don't take away necessarily. And there's also a kind of much, much more pragmatic point, which is to the extent that this doesn't kill Google, and I think we're a long way away from that. I know there are folks who disagree with me, but I do think we're a long way away from that. To the extent it's not a Google killer, then Google is going to be extremely careful to roll this out in a way that maintains their business model advantage. And you can see all kinds of folks complaining about Google's more fiscally oriented nature these days, the fact that they're being run much more conservatively. We've seen the layoffs. We've seen a bit more of a CFO driven culture, and obviously folks complain about that. And it may mean that the next round of pure science innovation doesn't come out of Google in the way that some of these things have in the past potentially. But I think there's any CFO driven company has that mandate to keep earnings ticking in the right direction, and Google has a phenomenal record as a public company of doing that and being rewarded for doing that. So I think the biggest question we should ask ourselves when we're thinking, is this or something like it going to roll out, is where are the ads? Where are the ads? Are the ads working yet? Are they native? Are they as good, if not better, than keyword driven ads? And are they integrated in such a way that it's natural to click on them? And it can't be that every link on the page is an ad, because if everything's an ad, nothing gets a click. That's a slight exaggeration, but the genius and the beauty of AdWords originally is that they were the first real native ad. They were the first thing that was an ad unit that was the same thing as the organic unit. In other words, a link to a page. And them being in stream to some degree, top of the bottom of the page, was obviously an increase in those clicks. The blending, the blurring of the line between paid and non-paid is but shocking, and that's again a rant for another day. But I don't think it works if you have a kind of SGE, search generative experience, and some ads. The ads need to be the same native unit as other links, other organic links on the page. And what that means is that there have to be links out of the generative experience. And to the extent that there are organic links out of the generative experience, then I think, well, SEO ain't dead. It might change, but the ranking factors may be different. There could be new challenges in there, could be more links, fewer links, more context, more information pulled out of those links, different qualification criteria for appearing there. But fundamentally, rankings have had a good dose of artificial intelligence in them for some time now. And I kind of see it as an extension of some of the same things. And particularly coming back to where I started talking about whether it's my my passion or a conflict of interest, is when we relate it back to the things that we do at SearchPilot, the kind of testing that we're running and the kind of scaled user experience that our customers have on their websites, then I think that's just going to be more and more in demand over the next couple of years, because the more of a black box it is, the less it's a traditional set of search ranking factors, and the less checkbox and checklist oriented it is, like through an audit and say, here's the things you obviously need to do to perform better. The more it looks actually like impressing users. And the LLM, I mean, it's a bit easy to think of these things as human and ascribe emotions where there are none, maybe. But we kind of need to impress the LLM, right? We need to be recommended by the LLM. And that sounds to me more like figuring out how we impress our users than it does figuring out how we impress an old school checklist driven pre-AI search engine. And okay, so if that's true, then the way to do well in that environment is going to look more like the way that we do or have always done conversion rate optimization, for example, where we're experimenting to find out researching and then experimenting to find out what our human users are going to want. And we're going to be doing the same kind of thing, to experiment and research to find out what gets rewarded by the robots too. And that's, I guess, my philosophy. That's where I'm coming from. Some folks have asked me for my views on SGE. I think that's it in a nutshell. I think it's a sustaining innovation, not a disruptive one. I don't think it kills Google. To the extent it doesn't kill Google, I think we've got to follow the money and see where the ads appear, and where it's not going to work unless those ads are native and look just like organic links that also appear on the page. To the extent that that's true, SEO continues, and so does its SEO testing. So I hope that's been interesting. A bit of a random walk through artificial intelligence, machine learning, and large language models this week. I'll try and have some more pop culture recommendations next week. Who knows? The final thing to end on is I saw some incredible stats about Taylor Swift's business acumen, and some of the most fun conversations I've been having on social media recently have all revolved around definition of a Swiftie. And I think I count myself in that bucket as a fan of her business prowess above all else. So supremely talented in that regard, on top of obvious talents as a performer. And I think anyway, maybe there'll be some business lessons from Taylor Swift to come in the future weeks. If you want more of that, probably follow me on social. If you want more about SEO testing, and in particular, if you'd love to see the SearchPilot SEO testing platform in action, head over to searchpilot.com/live, fill out the form there, and we'll be in touch. There's also some resources, more detail about some of the things I've talked about this week. And I'll be back here most weeks this kind of time. But if you want to know exactly when, follow us on social. At Will Critchlow is me, at SearchPilot is the organization. We'll tweet and LinkedIn about these things, or you can follow SearchPilot on YouTube, which is probably the best place to follow the live stream. And I'm here around this time most Tuesdays. So take it easy.